They said the baby cried every night because someone else was calling him. Not hunger, not sickness, not pain. At exactly midnight, when the village fell silent and even dogs tucked their tails between their legs, the child's cry rose sharp and desperate, as though he was being pulled from the world by invisible hands. Amanda learned quickly that no prayer stopped it, no song calmed it, and no mother's love was enough to silence what waited in the dark. By the time she discovered why her child cried like that, she had already made a decision that would place her face to face with forces older than her village, older than fear itself. This is the story of Amanda. In Amanda's village, a woman was measured by sound. The sound of children running across her compound. The sound of voices calling mama. The sound of laughter breaking pots in peace. Amanda's compound had none of that. For years, it remained painfully quiet, so quiet that even footsteps sounded like accusations. Each month, the moon came and went, faithful in its cycle, leaving her womb untouched, unchanged, empty. And each time it did, the village noticed. They did not always speak loudly. Some shook their heads in pity. Others smiled with cruelty disguised as concern. She has cooked for years, they whispered, and nothing has boiled. Amanda heard everything. She heard it in the market when women paused mid-greeting. She heard it at the stream when conversations died as she approached. She heard it in the silence that followed every prayer. They said her womb was locked. They said she was cursed. They said she must have offended the ancestors in a past life. Amanda survived by learning not to respond. She lowered her eyes. She mastered a smile that never reached her heart. She swallowed her tears before they embarrassed her. At night, when the world finally left her alone, she pressed her palms against her flat stomach and begged. She begged the heavens. She begged the ancestors. She begged the earth beneath her sleeping mat. She drank bitter herbs that burned her throat. She endured painful cleansings that left her shaking. She knelt until her knees hardened. Hope became dangerous. Because every time she allowed herself to believe, disappointment returned sharper than before. Her husband, Obinna, had not always been this quiet. In the early days of their marriage, laughter lived in their home. He touched Amanda as though afraid she might disappear. He spoke of the future with certainty, children running through their compound, prosperity following them like a shadow. But childlessness and poverty are cruel companions. They arrived together and refused to leave. Men mocked him openly. A tree without fruit, they called him. A man with no tomorrow. Elders advised him to marry another woman, speaking of Amanda as though she were damaged goods. Obinna rejected them publicly, but at home, his frustration fermented. His words shortened. His silences grew heavy. His eyes carried questions Amanda was afraid to ask. Some nights, he stared at her as though torn between love and blame. Other nights, he left the house without explanation and returned before dawn smelling of smoke and unfamiliar oils. Amanda never questioned him. She told herself endurance was love. That patience would soften him. That suffering quietly was better than being abandoned loudly. Then Amanda's body betrayed everyone's expectations. It began with sickness that refused to be ignored. Violent nausea. Dizziness that bent the world sideways. A weariness so deep it felt as though her bones were dissolving. When the old midwife examined her, her hands trembled. "You are carrying life," she whispered, as though afraid the words might vanish if spoken too loudly. Amanda laughed. Then she cried. Then she shook. The news spread faster than truth ever did. Women who once avoided her now touched her stomach cautiously. Some praised God loudly. Others warned quietly that miracles often came with prices. The village celebrated. But Obinna did not. He did not dance. He did not slaughter a goat. He did not announce his joy to the ancestors. Instead, he withdrew. He avoided Amanda's eyes. Flinched when she spoke of the child. Stayed awake long into the night staring at nothing. That was the first warning. The second warning arrived wearing prosperity. It came suddenly, unnaturally. One morning, men arrived at their compound unloading sacks of rice and cement. By evening, goats filled their yard. Debts vanished. Land appeared in Obinna's name without explanation. Poverty fled as though chased. Men who once mocked Obinna now bowed. Elders who avoided his home now sought his counsel. But peace did not follow wealth. Obinna grew secretive. He disappeared for days and returned smelling of earth and smoke. He burned incense Amanda did not recognize and spoke words she could not understand. He warned her never to follow him, never to ask questions, never to speak of certain nights. Worse still, the elders stopped visiting. When Amanda greeted them on the road, they turned away. Standing alone in a house filled with riches and fear, Amanda felt a cold realization settle in her chest. For the first time since life stirred in her womb, she wondered, what if this child had not come as a blessing, but as payment? Amanda's pregnancy advanced like a secret the world was afraid to acknowledge. Her belly rounded slowly, deliberately, as though the child inside her was cautious about fully arriving. Women visited with gifts and forced smiles. They spoke blessings loudly, but their eyes searched her face for something else, fear perhaps, or confirmation of rumors they were not yet brave enough to voice. At night, Amanda's dreams changed. She dreamed of water first, a wide, dark river that did not flow forward but circled endlessly in on itself. She stood at its bank holding her belly, calling out, but her voice made no sound. From beneath the surface, shapes moved. Not fish, not animals. Hands, many of them, reaching upward, brushing against the surface without breaking it. Each time she woke, her body was soaked in sweat, her heart pounding violently. And each time, she found Obinna awake beside her, staring into the darkness as though he too was listening to something she could not hear. When she asked what troubled him, he answered with silence. Silence thick enough to choke. The wealth continued to grow, but it no longer brought excitement. It brought unease. Obinna spent money recklessly, as though afraid it might vanish if he hesitated. He bought land without negotiation, livestock without inspection, favors without gratitude. He walked taller, spoke louder, but his eyes carried a permanent shadow. At night, he avoided Amanda's touch. When she reached for him, he stiffened. When she whispered about the baby, his jaw tightened. Sometimes, she caught him staring at her stomach with an expression that made her skin crawl. Not love, not anticipation, but calculation. Once, when she gently asked where the money was coming from, his reaction startled her. "Do not ask me questions," he said sharply. "You are not ready to hear the answers to." Fear flashed in his eyes before he turned away. Amanda said nothing after that. But fear, once invited, does not leave quietly. Obinna began leaving the house more often after sunset. He dressed only in dark clothes when he did. He carried small bundles wrapped tightly in cloth, held close to his chest. He returned before dawn smelling of smoke, earth, and oils Amanda had never used in her life. He washed his hands obsessively, sometimes until they bled. Amanda noticed small cuts on his palms that never healed properly. When she asked how he got them, he muttered something about work and changed the subject. The incense he burned filled the house with a choking sweetness that made Amanda nauseous. When she complained, he snapped that some things were better left undisturbed. Outside their compound, the village changed. Children no longer played nearby. Dogs refused to cross the boundary into their yard. Even chickens scattered whenever Obinna approached. People admired their wealth, but no one celebrated it openly. It was as if the village understood something Amanda did not yet fully grasp. Unable to carry the weight alone any longer, Amanda sought out an old woman who lived at the edge of the village. She was one of the few who still greeted Amanda without fear. The woman listened quietly as Amanda spoke, her eyes growing darker with every word. When Amanda finished, silence settled heavily between them. Finally, the woman shook her head. "Wealth that comes before life," she said slowly, "is often paid for with life." Amanda's chest tightened. She asked what the woman meant, but the old woman stood abruptly, crossing herself. "Go home," she said urgently. "Do not walk after sunset, and whatever you do, protect that child." She refused to say more. As Amanda walked back, the wind picked up suddenly, rattling trees and carrying with it a whisper that chilled her bones. She placed both hands on her stomach. For the first time, fear outweighed joy. The child arrived on a night the wind refused to rest. Thunder rolled without rain. The earth shook as though something beneath it was turning over in its sleep. Amanda screamed until her voice broke, gripping the mat while the old midwife muttered prayers older than the village itself. When the baby finally emerged, a boy with wide, unblinking eyes, the wind stopped abruptly. The child did not cry at first. He stared, as though already aware of a world too cruel to greet him gently. When his cry finally came, it cut through the night sharp and piercing, like a warning. Amanda wept, clutching her son to her chest, whispering his name again and again as if naming him could anchor him to the living world. Obinna stood apart. He did not touch the child. He did not smile. He stared at the boy the way one stares at an approaching storm. From the very first night, the child cried only after midnight. Not hunger, not pain, not discomfort. At exactly the same hour every night, his cry rose suddenly, desperate and urgent, as though responding to a call only he could hear. Nothing soothed him during those hours. Amanda sang until her throat burned, rocked him until her arms went numb, pressed him to her breast until tears soaked her clothes. The crying continued until dawn. Then it stopped, as abruptly as it began. That was when Amanda noticed the marks. Faint symbols appeared on the child's skin in the early hours of the morning, dark against his soft flesh. By sunrise, they vanished completely. Amanda scrubbed gently, prayed fiercely, told herself exhaustion was playing tricks on her mind. But fear sharpens perception. Dogs howled endlessly outside their compound. Chickens scattered whenever the child cried, and Obinna grew thinner by the day, as though each cry carved something out of him. One afternoon, as Amanda sat outside rocking her restless son, an old woman approached slowly, leaning heavily on her staff. Her eyes lingered on the child, filling with sorrow so deep Amanda's breath caught. "He was promised," the woman said quietly. The world tilted. The woman spoke carefully, explaining how desperate men went where desperate men always went. To shrines that demanded silence. To powers that listened when humans knelt low enough. Years ago, when Obinna was drowning in poverty and shame, he had gone there. He begged for wealth, for honor, for escape. The price was simple. His first child. Not immediately. But when love had grown deep enough to bleed. Amanda's scream tore through the afternoon. Amanda did not believe the old woman. She could not. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Her hands tightened around her child until he whimpered softly, grounding her in the present, in flesh and breath. She shook her head violently as if denial alone could erase what had been spoken. "You are lying," she said finally, her voice cracking. "You are jealous. You want to poison my joy." The old woman did not argue. She only sighed, a sound heavy with too many buried truths. "Ask your husband," she said quietly. "Ask him why wealth came before the child. Ask him why the elders stopped visiting. Ask him why your baby cries when the spirits pass." Then she turned and walked away, leaving Amanda standing alone with a truth that refused to stay buried. That night, Amanda waited. She did not cook. She did not speak. She did not greet Obinna when he returned home. She sat on the mat with her child pressed to her chest, her eyes fixed on the doorway. When Obinna finally entered, the look on her face told him something had changed. "Tell me," she said simply. Obinna froze. "I said tell me," she repeated, her voice steady in a way that frightened even her. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then his legs gave way beneath him. He collapsed. His body shook violently as years of fear spilled out of him like rot exposed to air. He wept openly, loudly, clawing at the floor as though trying to hold himself together. "I didn't think it would go this far," he sobbed. "I just wanted a way out." He confessed everything. The shrine hidden deep beyond the farmlands. The night he knelt there alone, stripped of pride. The voices that answered when he called. The bargains sealed with blood and silence. They had promised him wealth, respect, escape from mockery. In return, they demanded his first child. Not immediately, but when love had grown strong enough to make the loss unbearable. Amanda listened without interrupting. Her hands trembled. Her breath came shallow. Something inside her hardened like cooling metal. Outside, the wind began to rise. Rage came first, then betrayal, then something colder, clearer, purpose. Amanda did not scream at Obinna. She did not strike him. She did not curse him. She simply stood. "You sold our child," she said quietly, before he took his first breath. Obinna reached for her, but she stepped back. From that night onward, Amanda stopped being afraid. Fear requires uncertainty. Now she knew the enemy. She tied her son to her back and watched. She learned the rhythm of the unseen, the hours when the air thickened, the nights when shadows stretched too long, the moments when her child stirred before the cries began. She listened, and she remembered old stories. Stories women told while pounding yam. Stories spoken in half voices about mothers who had challenged gods, spirits, covenants written without their consent. Those stories never ended softly. but they ended standing. Before dawn one morning, Amanda left the village. She walked past familiar paths and into places women were warned never to go alone. She visited healers whose names were never spoken aloud, women whose eyes held too much knowing, men who smelled of smoke, herbs, and silence. Some refused her immediately. They recognized Obinna's name. Others listened carefully and shook their heads. A covenant made willingly cannot be undone without consequence, one said. Blood was promised, said another. Blood must answer. Amanda left each place heavier than before, but not empty-handed. She gathered charms, warnings, fragments of forbidden knowledge. She learned the rules of the unseen, how spirits tested resolve, how they marked what was theirs, how resistance was noticed long before it succeeded. She fasted until her knees weakened, prayed until her lips cracked, bathed her child in protective waters at dawn and dusk. She marked doorways with symbols older than the shrine itself. Each act felt like throwing stones at a mountain, but she threw them anyway. The spirits responded. Illness crept into the house like fog. The child burned with fever that herbs could not break. His cries sharpened, filled with a panic that did not belong to an infant. Obinna collapsed one evening, blood trickling from his nose as he screamed names Amanda did not recognize. The wind tore through the compound, ripping cloth from lines, slamming doors open and shut with furious insistence. A voice filled the room without entering it. Not loud, not soft, not human. A reminder, a debt acknowledged, a promise sealed. Amanda felt it press against her chest, her womb, her child. For a moment, just a moment, fear nearly won. Then her son reached up, his tiny fingers curling into her skin. And something ancient stirred in her. The elders came the next day. Their faces were grim, their voices heavy with authority and fear. They told Amanda she was endangering everyone. That spirit's anger did not punish only the guilty. That tradition existed to prevent greater destruction. They told her to surrender the child when the time came. Obinna knelt beside them, broken, begging her to listen. Amanda looked at them all. The elders who praised wealth without asking its source. The men who advised her replacement. The husband who sold her future. And something inside her snapped free. The world had already decided whose life mattered least. It would not be hers again. That night, under a swollen red moon, Amanda made her final decision. If the spirits would not release their claim, she would force a reckoning. Not with fear, not with bargaining, but with defiance fueled by love. The night the spirits came did not arrive with fire or thunder. It arrived quietly, respectfully, like an old creditor who had waited long enough. The moon hung low and red, swollen like an unhealed wound. The air grew thick, heavy, pressing against Amanda's chest until breathing became work. Her son slept fitfully against her back, his small body burning with fever. Obinna paced the compound like a trapped animal. He whispered prayers tangled with apologies, his voice cracking beneath the weight of his own cowardice. Then the wind changed direction. It circled the house slowly, deliberately, lifting dust and leaves into a tightening spiral. The door swung open without touch. The incense Obinna once burned began to smoke again, though no flame touched it. From the corners of the room, shadows gathered. They did not crawl. They did not move. They formed. And then they spoke. Not with mouths, but with presence. The debt had matured. The time had come. Amanda did not run. Her legs shook, but her arms were steady as she held her child closer. She pressed her lips to his head, breathing him in as though sealing him to the living world. She felt the pull then, strong, relentless, like hands reaching for her soul through her flesh. Something inside her tore open, not in surrender, in fury. "You will not take him," Amanda said. Her voice cracked the air. "You made a bargain with a desperate man, not with me." The shadows rippled. Laughter echoed, not mockery, but certainty. They spoke of rules older than names, of covenants sealed by blood and belief. They showed her visions. Obinna kneeling at the shrine, his hands shaking dot. The moment wealth was released because payment had been accepted. They showed her the child's spirit marked long before his first breath. Amanda wept, but she did not beg. She turned to Obinna, in front of the spirits, in front of the ancestors, in front of the world that had allowed this to happen. She spoke the truth aloud. She named his greed, his cowardice, his willingness to trade innocence for pride. Each word struck him like a lash. Obinna collapsed, sobbing openly, confessing not just the covenant but every selfish thought that led him there. Then Amanda did the unthinkable. She stepped forward. She removed the charms, lowered the protections, stood exposed. "If blood is required," she said steadily, "take the one who stands knowingly. Take me." The air vibrated violently. The spirits hesitated. A life offered freely carried a different weight. Sacrifice born of love disrupted balances built on greed. The spirits did not take Amanda. They turned instead to the source of the covenant. Obinna screamed as the shadows closed around him. Not his life. Everything else. The wealth evaporated in an instant. Structures cracked and collapsed like sand. Lands reverted. Livestock scattered. Money burned to ash. Protection was stripped away. Favor withdrawn. Illusion shattered. The spirits declared the covenant fulfilled. Not through death. Through ruin. The wind stilled. Silence returned. Amanda collapsed to the ground, clutching her son as dawn bled slowly into the sky. The child's fever broke. The marks never returned. The house felt lighter. Morning came slowly, cautiously, as though the world itself was unsure it should continue after what had passed through the night. Where wealth once shouted, silence now ruled. The compound stood broken, walls cracked, the yard empty. Ash settled like morning dust over what had once been abundance. The air felt clean in a way that only follows devastation. Amanda sat on the ground with her son, pressed against her chest, watching the sun climb into the sky. For the first time since his birth, he slept peacefully. No midnight cries, no restless stirring, just breath, warm and steady. Obinna lay nearby, alive, but emptied. His eyes stared without seeing. The man who once walked proudly among elders now looked smaller than his own shadow. Everything he had gained was gone, stripped away in a single night, leaving behind only the truth of what he had chosen. The spirits had not taken his life, they had taken his lie. By midday, the village gathered. They came cautiously, drawn by rumors that spread faster than fear. They saw the ruin. They saw Obinna. They saw Amanda standing tall with a child who showed no mark of darkness. No one spoke at first. Then whispers began. Some said Amanda was protected. Others said she was dangerous. A few said she had angered forces better left alone. The elders arrived last. Their authority felt thinner now. They asked questions carefully, choosing words like men walking on cracked ground. Amanda answered none of them. She had learned that explanations were a privilege often denied to women like her. Obinna tried to speak. No one listened. By evening, the judgment was silent but clear. He would not be welcomed again. Not as an elder. Not as a man of honor. He had become a warning. Amanda packed nothing. There was nothing left to carry except her child. She strapped him securely to her back and walked away from the compound that had held her pain, her fear, and her transformation. She did not look back. She did not forgive Obinna. She did not curse him either. Some debts do not require words. As she passed through the village, women watched her with new eyes. Mothers held their children tighter. Men avoided her gaze. Amanda did not bow. She walked straight ahead. She carried scars, visible and unseen, but she carried something stronger. She had faced gods and survived. In time, her story spread. It was told in whispers first, then in warnings, then in songs mothers hummed softly at night. They said wealth obtained through blood never prospers. They said spirits listen when men kneel in desperation. They said no covenant is stronger than a mother who decides to fight. Children grew up knowing her name, not as a victim, but as a woman who stood between darkness and her child and refused to step aside. If you were Amanda, would you have forgiven the man who sold your child before he was born? To my amazing Afritales family, I am deeply grateful for your loyalty and belief in this journey, and I promise to keep bringing you stories that move your soul and stay with you long after the video ends.